So hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. As Charlotte said, I'm Eva and this is my husband Charlie.
Nice to meet you.
We're both architects. So we were lucky enough to work for Miller Howard Workshop for a number of years and have recently opened up our own little practice called Rural Space Architecture. And today's talk is a collection of architectural precedents of interventions that you can do throughout, you may be able to do around your house, and hopefully it will give you a little bit of inspiration, a little bit more confidence of what you can do, and hopefully highlight how an architect can help you throughout this process and add value to your project. So a little bit about a little bit of insight about what is an architect. So basically we're really good problem solvers. We're trained for a number of years to think innovatively and out of the box. We've got good understanding of legislation and good consultants on board that we can recommend, as well as contractors and builders. We can really sort of help you and hold your hand throughout the whole process of your building. So in the UK, the term architect is protected. You have to be qualified and registered with the Architects Registration Board to be called an architect. You can also be a RIBA chartered member, or your practice can be RIBA chartered. So that just ensures that your architect doesn't have to be RIBA chartered, but it just ensures that you've got a good quality service level. You're held to quite a high regard. So generally architects will work with the RIBA plan of stage of work, which is the Royal Institute of British Architects. This is split into pre-planning stages 0 to 2, where the concept happens, planning, which is 3, and then 4 to 7 is post-planning bits. So those are where you do your technical drawings and you sort of build your building and we hand it over to you. So an architect can really help you throughout the whole process. They can either sort of do planning drawings and then you go off to a builder, or we can be involved throughout the whole process and be contract administrators and just make sure that your building is designed to the quality that you want. We also recommend that if you do work with an architect, there's an appointment in place. We tend to use the RIBA contracts, which they're pretty standard, and it's just there to protect you and us, to make sure that you'll pay us and we'll do what we promise to do. So that's a little bit of background knowledge. Over to you.
So we're very lucky to be living in Stroud itself, in the mixture of the Five Valleys, or most of us are, and you may have even been even more lucky to actually grown up in this area. And your needs may have changed over time, or you might have moved to the area. You might have a growing family, elderly relatives that are starting to move into your house, or, as most of us are doing, working from home and trying to find a space that really fits for you. Stroud itself is full of a mix of different typologies, which is really nice, and lots of different charms and characters. Some of these are listed, but that doesn't mean you can't do something. That means you can do something, just slightly limited, but that's where an architect can really help. The reason I wanted to show about the sort of mix of typologies and of different characters and sizes is more to highlight that we would try and push towards reusing what you have rather than building a brand new house, because the construction industry is one of the biggest contributors to carbon in this country as well as the world. So if we can reuse our existing structures as much as we can, that's the better. A lot of the projects that we seem to see is still stuck in a formal layout where you've got separate dining rooms, separate serviced by a small little kitchen, or other separate segregated areas. When it doesn't seem to suit today's lifestyle, where people either want to live open planned, or where the kitchen becomes part of the centre of the home and where everything is happening. This is where an architect can really just look at your plans and just start to evolve that space.
So the first thing we would say, if you've just moved into your house, or even if you've lived there for a number of years, is just observe how you feel in spaces. There may be areas that you really, really like, even if it's a tiny cottage, and there's areas that you might just get really frustrated with. So that's a really good starting point to write your brief, write out what you want to achieve, and then hand it over to your architect to work with. In the opposite case, if you generally have no idea as to what you want to do, again, an architect can be involved from a very early stage and can help you form your brief and analyse the spaces with you and try and work together to an outcome. So when we are involved, the first thing that we do is just zoom out and check what restrictions your house can have. So this is a very useful map from Stroud District Council that highlights all the AO and B areas, which are the areas of outstanding natural beauty, and conservation areas, which are quite a few in Stroud. And that will basically mean that you're most likely to need planning for that. It's also really good because you can have a look if there's any tree preservation orders on your land. And it's also a very good starting point to get your title deeds from your solicitor to make sure that if there's any covenants or easements that restrict your building to be developed in more detail. So that's the first thing we sort of check. Then we sort of zoom in and we analyse your site. So we have a look at what's its relationship with the wider site, how is it orientated in relation to where the sun comes, your prevailing winds, how it's in relationship to other clusters of buildings that may be around your building. And then we look into your actual plan in terms of how is its circulation working, how are the flows of spaces between. So we do a lot of analysis to start with. And generally we like to design having the garden in mind, so we always try to incorporate outside in and enhance whatever elements you have, even if your garden is quite small. Like our one was a post stamp, box stamp, sort of tiny little garden when we bought it, when we bought our property.
So what we're going to show you over the next couple of slides is a series of precedents from small interventions, medium interventions, and much larger, bigger interventions that you can do on your thing. In this case, small, of using what exists. So a lot of the time, a really simple place to start is your windows. They can be a bit too small, so it might be a simple case of making them bigger, making them frame a key view outside, or even utilising them for more, like for storage. We could build integrated storage, or they could even transform into, let's say, like a reading nook or a window seat, so you can have an inside-outside connection with your home. If the window becomes a bit of a barrier, that's where we may even say, oh, why don't we look at sliding doors or bifold, just to bring that inside-outside space as one. You could even, if space is becoming dark, start looking at roof lights. These are really simple interventions, but let's say you were living in a terrace house and you've got the back alley garden and you want to infill that space. Sometimes putting a load of roof lights along can bring light to what was a dark space within the centre of your home and can totally transform the space. If you're in a bit more of a conservation area or listed buildings, sometimes we need to look a bit more specific at the windows, and that's sometimes conservation roof lights. But again, an architect can look at a range of different options to help. Again, one place that is almost overlooked, and not all houses have, is a porch. Simple intervention at the front. You know, you're carrying your kids, you're carrying your shopping, it's pouring down, you just want a bit of shelter before you get into the house. It's someone to stick your boots, stick the logs, stick the bikes, but these could be covered spaces or even something that's traditional that frames your house or something contemporary. You could even pick up on architectural interventions you're doing around the rest of your house as a hint to what you're doing around the outside. Or if you're building a new entrance, maybe you could even look to bringing that arrival space, that porch, within your building, and that becomes a really interesting threshold.
So Charlie has just spoken about small interventions within your existing structure. So now we were going to look at medium impact proposals. So if your budget does allow and you do have a little bit more space and you really do need more space, we're going to look at extensions at the rear of your house or at the side of your house that could potentially be an open plan kitchen, dining room area that you can enjoy with your family. So this is when an architect can really help with the shape and the form and the materiality of things. For example, you could pick up upon existing materials that your house has and bring those forward to your new proposal, but with a contemporary twist. Or this could be a proposal that's really clearly defined as something new against the old. Also at the pre-planning stages, so 0 to 2, we're sort of really good at exploring through models and precedents and sketches forms of buildings, materiality of buildings, and this can be something that is a material that's very that you really enjoy to use, or that it's more appropriate for the context that it's located in. for example, this project by Emil Eve Architects, it's not about just adding a box at the end of your house. So they've very successfully here added because when you extend out, where the end of your house used to be can become quite dark. So they've successfully added in a indoor-outdoor courtyard here that brings in more light into the centre of the house, and also creates a really beautiful nook over here that you can sit and look out. And again, the garden is not a very big size here, but it still creates those connections. So it's trying to think about it a little bit more holistically in terms of your brief and the context, and just try and bring those bits of joy and magic. And again, if you are extending and you have a little bit of, you're reconfiguring downstairs and you've got a little bit of existing space that you can sacrifice, or your extension can have a little bit more space next to it for a utility room, we would highly recommend adding these spaces because they're really undervalued. But actually, it's raining quite a lot. We all have muddy boots and muddy paws and cats and dogs that get really messy and just need the space, a dedicated space to dry off. And these can create good opportunities for connecting the garden, the back of the house, as a threshold between the garden and your kitchen, for example.
As we all know, last year was a bit hot, and there are some architectural interventions that you can do to start bringing in a bit more shadows into your home to give you a bit more cooling. And this can just be as simple as an architectural structure as a pergola. You can obviously gather underneath them, enjoy nice dinners out them, but let plants grow up them, provide more shading, but they could also make connections to other buildings outside. Maybe even special moments in your garden you want to get to, but this adds a bit of more cover for your house, but also yourself. And on the sort of working from home, if you can't find that space within your home or your extension, what you're trying to achieve, even in the smallest of gardens, you can put a pod or a specially designed office for you that suits your needs, as we don't need as big space as we think, where you can really enjoy yourself with the inside and outside relationship.
So lastly, like on a higher impact solution where your brief really does require more space, and if you obviously have the budget and a little bit more land around your house, these are sort of examples of where you're doubling up your existing footprint of your house. These can be a little bit more tricky to get planning because obviously the planners don't like you overdeveloping, but that is again where an architect can really help, because they can help you form the narrative of why this building needs to be increased and why it needs to be positioned where it is, and how actually this new chapter of the building is adding a whole new life, breath of life to your current house that will help you live your life. Again, these proposals can be something that sits sort of enhance and complement the existing structure. We personally like to add a hierarchy to things, so we like to let the existing original building breathe and have space, and the new extension sits more quietly and respectfully next to the building, but that's maybe a bit of a personal choice. But in tricky A and B areas, it is good to show why you've done the things the way you've done, and a story behind and a reason behind you want your building to increase so much.
You may have been lucky enough to have lived in or purchased, let's say, a former farmhouse or a bigger house, and they come with lots of different outbuildings, and these buildings can just offer just those to give you more spaces within your brief. A lot of the time people think, we need to just build new, but these buildings can be connected into your original building, especially through either subtle linking structures on like the top left, or you'd be more contemporary and bold and say, that is a clear connection between the new and the old.
Yeah, so hopefully this has given you a little bit of an overview as to the things we would be considering when we are visiting your property. We've all seen programs like Ugly House, The Lovely House, and what was it called?
Yeah.
Yes, and Your Home Made Perfect. And they do this. These are where they do bring architects on at an early stage, and it really helps them visualize and make a unique property to them that is tailored, and it's just nice to live in. So we hope this has helped, and we look forward to having chats with you in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask, have you got examples of where you've surprised yourselves perhaps, or managed to get permissions to change the outside or add big time to the outside of what is a listed building in a conservation area? Because that's quite the trickiest thing that I know.
Yeah, personally, I love those. And I think every single one that we've all done, be it Miller Howard or ourselves, are all special sort of moments. A lot of the projects we do work on are conservation and listed, so they are tricky sites, but each one is so different and unique. And I think there's such joy to have of showing something that is respecting the original building, but at the same time telling a story and evolution. Because, you know, through all of listed buildings' times, they've had evolutions every 50, 100 years. There's a Georgian bit, there's an Edwardian bit, there's a Victorian bit. And it's just nice to continue that story. And sometimes it's nice to just say, this is clearly of now, and wow. And sometimes one of my sort of favourite moments is when, if someone's moving to their forever home and you make that change, that's then secured that house for their entire lives, but also the future lives. You know, that means there's going to be less damage or destruction to the house. It's going to be respected and loved, and it'll be a joy for futures to come.
Is that an argument that you've put successfully to planners?
Yes, definitely. And
It's been a problem.
It really helps having planners early on board. So, my best example is the Grade 1 listed manor house, and bringing on those conservation officers at an early point. They do really respect that and discussing with them. And at the end of the day, it's not trying to make a building that is, when it is listed, is like, it's perfect for you. It might be that it's perfect for you and it's good for the building. Like, it's not, it's a bit of a different hierarchy when it is listed, but it is trying to future-proof these houses and not make them go to rack and ruin.
Because the worst thing you could do is put an extension on and then it gets ripped down in 50 years. If you can have something that's going to stay, fantastic. And like Eva was saying, like bringing on the people early, like again, sometimes Historic England want to be involved, and a lot of architects have good relationships with Historic England, all the conservation officers, and just can be quite frank and talk through their concerns, our concerns, client concerns, and come to a solution that suits everyone.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they will probably recommend things that are best for the building. So it could be that the limestone is more appropriate because it's more breathable for the building and it won't cause more damp. So they do kind of know what they're doing, if that makes sense. But a narrative does really help.
With certain limitations. We had one planner who was arguing with their own building regs people, and they both wanted the opposite thing to each other, which left us in no man's land. It's quite tricky there.
Yeah. Who else? No?
How do you decide on the budget?
How do we what?
How do you decide on a budget? How do you decide your fees and what's the variables?
So architects charge different things depending on the project, but we personally, we come and visit you, and then we have a look at what work needs to be done. So we don't price on, let's say, your budget's this, we're going to do a percentage. We'll price on, this is the work we think needs to be done, so we're going to price it for our time. And what we do is also split it stage by stage, so you're never committed to the whole works up to planning. You might just do one stage with us and go, actually that's enough, or you might just go up to planning and that's totally fine. You know, it's about being sort of flexible and whatever works for you.
I think it's this relationship between the owner and the planning office to begin with. You might have an idea what you want, but you need someone to express that for you.
Yeah, totally.
Planners, so that they will then agree.
Yeah.
Do you provide that service?
Yeah, that's our sort of our pre-planning work. So we've got 3 stages. So sort of stage 1, we zoom out and sort of do a load of sketch options and try and work out what's sort of works with your brief, or try things that you might have not thought of. Stage 2, we'll start zooming in and refining it and looking at the materiality a bit more and and sort of refine it. And then stage 3 is then all about bringing all this together into a document that then gets submitted to the planners for planning. But within those stages, like stage 2, you could have what's called a pre-application, and you get their comments much earlier. So there's sort of different ways, but each project has their sort of values and non-values to do so. But we can advise you whichever way.
Thank you.